Alright, YouTube, if I don't quite look my best right now, I spent literally about 4 hours today working outside. My hands are covered in blisters right now, so suffice it to say, I'm playing hurt tonight a little bit here. My fingers a little bit owie. But it's time to speak about Clinton again. I don't really want to make this many videos on Hillary, but when there's this deluge of negativity regarding her, when there's so much material ripe for the picking as far as how fucked up she is, it's difficult not to speak of it. I'd really much rather speak about world politics, about natural disasters, things that are, let's face it, of more interest to me. I'm not really at this point quite as interested in the next Hillary Clinton scandal because there are so many, but I have no choice because it's something that needs to be analyzed. I figured that I would talk about specifically why, if you're pro-war, if you like the idea of butchery and slaughter and genocide, foreign adventurism, overthrowing regimes, installing new ones, causing sectarian violence, you should be voting for Hillary Clinton. And I would pair this with Hillary Clinton's supporters. At least many of them are being completely fooled. The Democratic left, so-called, which Hillary Clinton is not technically a member of. She's not really a leftist. She's neoliberal, which has nothing in common with like JFK civil rights values any more than it does fiscal leftism. Increasing the tax rate by 0.5% is not a progressive tax plan. You can think that it is, but you'd be wrong. You'd be fooled into thinking that because you're a Democratic partisan. Hillary Clinton is an extreme jingoist. She is the most pro-war presidential candidate that we've seen in our lifetime, certainly. She's more pro-war than W was. She's more pro-war than Reagan was. She's more pro-war than actually any president that we've ever had, and more pro-war than at least all but one or two presidential candidates that we've had that have had any support behind them at all. Here we have a woman who voted in favor of the war in Iraq. Now, let's be clear, most of the House and Senate did. In fact, there were only a very small number of people anywhere who could be found after 9/11 who opposed the idea, certainly of the authorization of force to use in Afghanistan. That was one that was, it seemed like common sense at the time because we were all being told that Osama bin Laden, who was responsible and totally didn't die of renal failure before then, was in Afghanistan. Of course, he wasn't. He was in Pakistan at the time, one of our allies, which is why it took so long, supposedly, to kill him. I still haven't seen any evidence of that. As far as Iraq goes, though, the Bush administration said, well, he's got weapons of mass destruction. He's got chemical weapons. I would like to remind you, there are other countries around the world that have chemical weapons. The idea that he would have them is not itself necessarily, under any sort of reasoning insanity, a reason to go in and begin a ground invasion. However, W managed to convince the House and Senate it was a good idea, much to their discredit. It's obvious these people were not quite awake. They didn't ask the right questions. But Hillary went further. And this is my problem with her on the Iraq issue. She didn't just vote for the war, as almost everybody else in Congress did. That's excusable, because they were misled. She went further and she spoke glowingly of the idea and went a step further than just, well, this is somebody who's evil, and went into the realm of saying we will be declared liberators, this is a great service that we're doing to humanity. 500,000 civilian deaths and untold thousands of American deaths later. Destabilization later, rise of ISIS and similar groups because of that destabilization a decade later. Of course, she pretends to be a peacenik, but that's not the case. She didn't just vote for the war. She praised it. And that, I think, is the differentiation. There were people, for instance, Sanders is a good example. He voted against the war in Iraq. He voted to fund it once it began. I criticized him on this because I don't think that Congress should have funded the war. I think that Congress should have said, why should we invade Iraq in the first place? It has nothing to do with 9/11. Bush is clearly wrong. This is clearly propaganda. There's no reason to go in. And if it had been voted for, Had I been there, I would have voted against allocating funds to it because it was a bad idea. It was clearly, by that point, it was clearly a bad idea. They should have known better. They didn't. Many of them were dumb. Hillary was not only dumb, she used it as an issue to pander on. She used it as a way to drum up her supporters. Oh, well, see, I can be tough on America's enemies. And of course, then later on, she pretended that she had always been morally opposed to the idea. When things went sour, people began dying, and it was clear we weren't really achieving our mission objectives. All of a sudden, oh, yeah, oh, that horrible that horrible war that I voted for, that I glowingly praised, echoing Netanyahu himself, who said basically exactly what I've said in my own speech in favor of it. But it doesn't stop there. One war does not a warmonger make. We've been at war most of the years of our existence, in some form or another. Now, Korea, of course, makes it look more warmongering than it would otherwise be, because technically that war never ended. It ended in a ceasefire, not an actual declaration of peace. But that aside, Hillary was also for the overthrow of the Egyptian government, which was a legitimately elected government that was maintaining order in a nation where there are millions and millions of religious zealots. It almost destroyed one of the most important states in that region. They control the Suez Canal. They have a large economy. It would have been mayhem. It would have been disaster on an untold scale if the Egyptian government had been successfully and permanently overthrown by the Muslim Brotherhood. Obama praised it. Hillary Clinton praised it. I didn't praise it. I said it was a bad idea. Anyone with common sense said it was a bad idea. Most of Obama's critics by that time realized that it wasn't a good idea. The Arab Spring was a lie. It wasn't a spring. It was the fall of civilized order within these countries. It was the rise of Sharia law. It was the rise of, in otherwise more or less secular states, like Turkey or Egypt or some place like that, or Libya, even to an extent. It was the rise of hardline Islamic imperialists within these countries, as a preface to what, if they destabilized enough, would have eventually become a caliphate. Because Egypt didn't fall, that will not happen. ISIS will not be able to establish a caliphate. They don't have nearly enough firepower to deal with the Turks. They don't have nearly enough firepower to deal with the Egyptians. The problem will continue to fester in the region, but it would have been far worse if the Suez Canal were currently controlled by ISIS members, which I assure you would be the case right now if their government had remained under the Muslim Brotherhood. They would have reached some sort of deal with ISIS. They'd be in partnership with them. They'd probably be the head of the southern tier of the Caliph state, with Turkey being goaded into taking the helm of the northern tier of the Caliph state or something like that. It would have been mayhem. It would have been terrible. NATO would have had problems. This whole region would have erupted into civil war. She was for overthrowing the government of Libya. Now, Gaddafi was not a nice dude. He was a tyrant, just like Saddam Hussein was. You have to be kind of dumb to not realize that these people were tin horns. But just because somebody is a tin horn doesn't mean that removing them makes the situation magically better. Removing them could lead to a worse situation regardless of what you do, or removing them could lead to a worse situation if you don't do the right thing. In the case of Iraq, it's the latter. We didn't do the right thing in Iraq. We spent our time with contractors trying to nation build, never really addressing the fundamental issue of the militants that cropped up, or the sectarian strife that occurred there. We pissed off the Sunni minority within that population, and naturally these people, now disenfranchised by their own government after enjoying a first-tier status next to the Shia for some decades under Saddam, naturally they would be resentful. Naturally they would be desirous of joining al-Qaeda, desirous of joining groups that in many cases Saddam himself had viciously opposed and attacked with great fervor when he was in power. Gaddafi did the same thing. Libya was relatively advanced under Gaddafi. Despite the fact that he was a totalitarian, that there wasn't really that great a degree of freedom there was stability. Unfortunately, by allowing a so-called organic movement that wasn't quite organic, let's face it, to overthrow Gaddafi, and of course drag him through the streets, sodomizing him with a stick, and hanging him, and so forth, and, killing all of the infidels in the country. Unfortunately, because we weren't even directly involved it let it metastasize even more quickly, and ISIS quickly grabbed control of some of these shoreline, sort of oil-rich regions which they wanted for their money. Hillary was in favor of that. She was in favor of Egypt, Iraq. She was also in favor of Obama's plan, which was roundly rejected by Congress, the American people, the people and the House of Commons of the UK when they tried to get involved under the auspices of Cameron. Both nations tried to begin using targeted strikes on Assad's forces directly. Oh, well, he gassed people, therefore we have to bomb him. People realized in both the UK and the US that that was a bad idea, because Assad may be a devilish man, but he's better than ISIS. And when the FSA is empowered, as the US, as Obama has continued to arm them, ISIS is indirectly empowered because the FSA doesn't want to bother fighting ISIS. They're fighting for almost the same goal anyway. They're too busy attacking Assad. Obama's plan there has been a disaster. It would have been a worse disaster if we had allowed him to start firing ship-based missiles into the country as he wished to do. There was no precedent for doing this. It would have been an act of war. It would have caused repercussions. Eventually, it would have led to a ground invasion. The only saving grace is that when Obama realized that the population was so dead set against it that he would probably be impeached if he underwent it, because the Republicans, of course, controlled the House and the Senate at the time, he deflected and said, okay, but I've got to let Congress okay it the proper way, knowing full well Congress wouldn't. See, that was his cop-out. That was his way of getting out of trouble. He put it forth and said, oh, well, I'll take a gamble here. I really want to get rid of Assad so that Sharia law can take hold in Syria, which is what he wants. It's what he wanted in Egypt under the Muslim Brotherhood. He kept praising them even after it was clear that was exactly what they were doing. He kept praising the people in Libya who wanted to overthrow secular order there, in Tunisia and elsewhere. It's pretty fucking clear what he wanted and what Hillary wanted there. When he realized, though, that his gamble had gone against him and that something like 80% of the population was tired of war and didn't want to attack the Syrians directly, Obama said, oh, okay, Congress has to okay it, though, of course. He did that after he already made the suggestion without mentioning it in the first place, because clearly he wanted it to happen. He just realized it wasn't likely, and he wanted to have a way out. Hillary, by the way, would do the same thing. Hillary Clinton is a jingoist. She wants a war in Syria. She wants the TPP, which would, let's face it, probably lead to struggles and civil wars in various countries as their economies sputter and fall by the wayside. Probably cause problems in Malaysia. Probably cause problems in Japan. Certainly cause problems here, which would just mean she can expand her and Obama's and Bush's police state. Hillary Clinton, long story short, is nothing more than a Bush. There's a reason why she gets along with the Bush family and praises George W. Despite a few years ago, Bush was supposedly the devil incarnate. Now she praises him. She praises him constantly. I am old enough, just old enough, to remember the W years. So for all of you who are younger than me and may not quite remember how really bad it was under George W., it was bad. He was completely retarded. This country went in exactly the wrong direction. The economy crumbled. Our standing in the world became little more than an embarrassment. He was a nut. He was a warmongering piece of crap nut. And Hillary Clinton is apparently his personal friend. She gets money from the same people he got money from, and Romney got money from, and Obama's gotten money from. She is more warmongering than Obama. She's more direct about it. She thinks that because she happens to be female and because she pretends that she's a liberal and not just a partisan Democrat neoliberal, that she can get away with literally anything. And so she's beyond reproach. And so she'll come out and use the media to lambaste anyone who criticizes, if she's elected, her foreign policy, by suggesting that they're a sexist, by suggesting that they're part of a conspiracy to smear her name, which is the most dangerous road we could go down as a country. We do not, when W was president, the media was honest enough to criticize him when it was clear that things were going terribly, terribly wrong. It was the people of the United States as well, eventually realizing that he was retarded, clinically retarded. He didn't have two brain cells to rub together. With Hillary Clinton, though, you have an exceptionally corrupt, well-practiced, and charismatic so-called individual who will retain a core of support that is afraid of being labeled a bigot if they challenge her. And that's extremely dangerous. George W. did not have that advantage. I'm sure that George W. Bush wished that he was a racial minority or a female at times, so that he could just drag out one of these ism cards and play it on the population to declare that all of his enemies were bigots. Hillary Clinton will do that in the blink of an eye. If she's questioned, if she's elected, she will begin multiple wars. I can guarantee that. We will be at war in Syria. We'll probably be on the ground in Libya. We'll probably have a greater presence back in Iraq. We'll be in 3 or 4 countries at the same time. Our economy will crack. We don't have the money right now. We are too far in debt to fund that many wars, number one. It's ethically wrong, number two. We'd just be dicking around, just trying to fulfill her massive ego. And number three, we would accomplish absolutely nothing. Nothing would be accomplished. It would make the situation worse. The answer proposed by neocon warmongers for a generation, and the neoliberals have adopted this basic ethos over time, is that if things go wrong, double down and do twice as much harm as you're already doing, without ever once considering the fact that your involvement in the situation is what caused it to be inflamed in the first place. When somebody points this out to you, call them unpatriotic. Ta-da! You've just solved the problem. Nobody wants to challenge you. George W. and all of his allies did this at the dawn of the Iraq War. Bill O'Reilly covered for him on TV every single night. CNN covered for him. The entire media covered for him. If you don't support the war against Saddam because somehow he magically was involved in 9/11 or something like that, then you're just a pinko, evil, unpatriotic piece of shit who should probably hang yourself. That's what we were told at the time. Now, it went right off my back like water. There were some who ignored this and said, well, this is clearly not true, it's clearly wrong, it's clearly a lie, and it's propaganda. It's wartime propaganda at its finest. It's like Vietnam or something like that. So it's literally our next Vietnam. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton will probably put us back in Vietnam. Not Vietnam over in Asia, of course, but Vietnam as in the Middle East. We'll probably have ground troops there. If you support the idea of limitless jingoism, if you think that the government should just keep printing currency out of thin air to fund war after war, and you don't care how many civilians die, and you don't care if American soldiers are maimed or die or come back with PTSD, and you don't care about children being hit by drones, then you should probably vote for Hillary Clinton because you'll get your wish. You'll get war all around the world. Unfortunately, because of her comments regarding Russia and cyber attacks, it would probably be a nuclear war. You won't be here for very long. You'll be turned most likely into a pile of ashes if you're in a metropolitan area. You'll probably die in great pain riddled with tumors if you're not in a metropolitan area, if you're anywhere near one. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, there's a good likelihood you'll get some disease or starve to death. That's your future on Hillary Clinton. It's not an exaggeration. We have it from her own mouth. She said it literally and explicitly. I don't understand how one person proclaiming that they don't like war, that they don't like bigotry, that they don't like the idea of third world children dying and keeling over and being shot at. I don't see how any one of them can possibly support this woman. When from her own mouth, admittedly, literally as clear as I see the webcam before me now, she said she would start a war with Russia. That's what she said. Military action is the result of data intrusion. It doesn't get any more clear than that. It's not ambiguous. She can't backtrack and say, oh, this is what I really meant. We know what she literally meant. Any response to a nuclear power by the United States in a military fashion is a great risk for an atomic exchange, or at the very least, a Cuban Missile Crisis style situation. It doesn't even have to be military at first. Even having a cyber response. You know, oh, well, they hacked this business, we'll take down a bunch of Russia's government servers. What if they declare that an act of war? What if the next day the missiles go hot? And you see increased sub-activity off of Florida. What if they start moving missiles back into Cuba all over again? Well, then I guess that you really do have Cold War 2.0 now, don't you? Only the Cold War would be pretty hot at that point. You think it would be 2 minutes for midnight, or maybe a minute and a half? Maybe you'll be lucky, it'll only be 2.5 minutes till midnight. I think we're at 3 minutes to midnight right now. People don't realize how dangerous this is. They're acting like it's a joke. Like the fact that, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton's a little bit out there. She gets confused. She's old, obviously. Yeah, maybe she's not in perfect health, but, she's sane and she wouldn't do anything to harm this country. I disagree. I think she would. I think there's every possibility that she would. She's already been in the White House. It's not like she hasn't, unlike Trump or many other people in recent elections, she's already been there. So when she proclaims insane things, she's already been told the ins and outs of top secret everything when she was the First Lady. She knows who our enemies are, she knows how they operate, and yet she suggests this. That shows to me that either she's nuts, she's forgotten all about that period like she forgot about every day at the State Department. She's got like Alzheimer's, memory loss, something like that, and she's literally like demented at this point. Number two, she's so corrupt, she doesn't care if she risks nuclear war. There's something in it for her. Saudi money, Chinese money, Israeli money, wherever it happens to be coming from, Iranian money, Korean money, she doesn't care as long as it's money or power or some sort of kickback. A clone of Huma Abedin to replace old Huma Abedin when she gets too old to service her or something. This is the kind of person that we're dealing with. She is not mentally all there. The things she is suggesting and her past, both recent and now fairly far past, we're talking about the Iraq War era, we're talking about over a decade ago, suggests to me that she's a massive warmonger, that she sees wars as a method by which to profit in a corporate interventionist manner. Don't call it capitalism, by the way. It's not. It's the military-industrial complex is not a free market. It's government giving kickbacks favorably to one corporation over other businesses. That's not equal. That's not a free market. It's not an even playing field. This is how Hillary Clinton operates. In that respect, she's exactly the same as the Bushes. She's exactly the same as her husband, W. Herbert Walker Bush. She's almost the same as Ronald Reagan. But you're not going to hear that, although she did shower praise on Reagan. She also showered praise on Truman, who hated blacks, Jews, Chinamen, as he called them, who nuked 500,000 Japanese civilians. Yeah. This is her role model. He killed 500,000 people in the span of a few days. That's her role model. And Ronald Reagan, who almost started World War III with his Star Wars bullcrap. And George W. Bush, who he killed 500,000 people too. It just took him longer. It takes a little longer when you're not using atomic bombs, I guess. But they're Middle Eastern, so who cares, says Hillary Clinton. I cared. I care about the little children in the third world being killed. I think an atomic war is preferable to other options mankind has. But she seems to want to risk it not only in the here and now, but for profit. And it's just madness. It's stupidity of the utmost order. And anybody who's supporting her has to think, I think, for a little while. You need to open up your mind and think for a bit. Take like 10 minutes to do this. Can you really live with yourself when you start seeing images of all those little third world children torn apart? Whether it's by terrorists, the U.S. military, like collateral damage when we have to march into 6 different states at the same time, or all the little kids that'll probably start starving here because, our economy completely gets fucked because our debt has gone through the roof even compared to the last, 10, 20 years. Yeah. Can you live with yourself? Hopefully some of you will say no. Unfortunately, a lot of you will say yes, because if you're a warmonger, you're probably already planning to vote for Hillary Clinton. That's about all. Peace out.